My cheating husband begged his mistress to leave me for him. Too bad she was working for me the entire time. His face was priceless. I believed David was my anchor for 8 years. We shared what I thought was unshakable love. We had 2 daughters who were our world, and I built my life around the certainty that he would never betray me. Our house sat on a tree-lined street where neighbors waved from their porches and children rode bikes until twilight. I remember those early evenings fondly, the sound of David's laughter mixing with our girls' giggles as they chased fireflies in the backyard, the warmth in his eyes when he'd find me reading on the porch swing, how he'd kiss my forehead and say, "I'm the luckiest man alive." And I believed him completely, so completely that I never imagined how thoroughly a person could deceive you when they decided your trust no longer mattered. But betrayal has a way of announcing itself in whispers before it screams. And the first whisper came on a Tuesday night last spring when David's phone buzzed during dinner. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The way his jaw tightened, the speed with which he flipped the phone face down and cleared his throat. "Everything okay?" I asked casually, cutting Emma's chicken into smaller pieces. He nodded too quickly. "Just work," he said, but his voice carried a note I'd never heard before, something guarded and guilty. Our older daughter, Sophia, looked between us with the intuitive awareness children have for tension, then went back to pushing peas around her plate. The moment passed, but it lodged in my chest like a splinter. Over the following weeks, those whispers grew louder. David started working late more often, his explanations becoming increasingly elaborate. "The Henderson project is behind schedule," he'd say, or "the client wants another revision by morning," always delivered with the same guilty undertone, always accompanied by his inability to meet my eyes directly. He began showering immediately when he came home, claiming he felt grimy from the office. But David had worked the same job for 6 years and had never felt compelled to wash off the day before kissing me hello. His phone became a fortress, locked with a passcode he changed without mention, positioned screen down on every surface like a guilty secret. When it rang during our Saturday morning coffee, he'd snatch it up and step outside to answer, returning with apologies about demanding clients who couldn't respect weekends. The David I married would have rolled his eyes at such calls, would have answered them in front of me with exaggerated sighs about work-life balance. This new David treated his phone like classified material and expected me not to notice the shift. Cut through me like glass because I knew my husband's tells, the way he rubbed his neck when lying, the slight upturn in his voice when he was nervous, the way his eyes would dart left when fabricating a story. I'd cataloged these unconscious habits over 8 years of marriage, and now I watched him deploy them against me with increasing frequency. Each small deception felt like a paper cut, individually minor, but collectively drawing blood that stained everything between us. I tried confronting him gently one evening after the girls were in bed. We were loading the dishwasher and I said, "You seem stressed lately. Is everything really okay at work?" He paused mid-rinse, holding a plate under the running water longer than necessary. "Define okay?" he said finally, his tone defensive. "I'm working hard to provide for this family, Sarah. That should be enough for you." The harsh edge in his voice stunned me. I'd asked a simple question born from concern and received a response that felt like a slap. I studied his profile as he aggressively scrubbed already clean dishes, his shoulders rigid with tension that had nothing to do with work deadlines. "I just want to make sure you're happy," I said softly, and he let out a bitter laugh that made my stomach drop. "Happy?" he repeated, as if the word tasted sour. "I'm doing what I have to do. That's all that matters right now." That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every recent interaction, searching for clues I'd missed. The way he'd started dressing differently, adding cologne to his morning routine, the way he'd begun suggesting I make plans with friends on weekends, claiming he needed space to decompress from work. The way he'd stopped touching me casually, no more hand on my shoulder as he passed, no more fingers trailing along my arm as we watched television, no more whispered jokes during the girls' piano recitals. We'd become polite strangers sharing a house and raising children together, and the man who once told me I was his everything now acted as though I was an obligation to be managed. The second whisper came when I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while gathering clothes for the dry cleaner. Dinner for two at Romano's, an expensive Italian place downtown, on a Thursday night when he'd claimed to be working late on the Henderson project. My hands shook as I read the date and time. While I'd been home helping Sophia with her math homework and giving Emma a bath, David had been sharing candlelit dinner with someone else. The receipt showed 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a shared dessert. Intimate details that painted a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't unsee. I stood in our bedroom, holding evidence of his deception, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet like an earthquake, rearranging the landscape of everything I believed about my marriage. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I began paying attention with the focused intensity of a detective, cataloging evidence. Thursday dinners became a pattern. Always claimed as late work, always at different restaurants, always for two people. I found more receipts tucked carelessly in his wallet, movie tickets for films we'd never discussed, hotel charges on our credit card statement for a boutique place across town when he'd supposedly been at a conference in the same city where we lived. The evidence accumulated like stones in my chest, each discovery heavier than the last, until I could barely breathe under the weight of his systematic betrayal. The third whisper was her perfume, clinging to his shirt collar, a scent I didn't recognize, sweet and floral where I preferred subtle and woody. It was faint but unmistakable, foreign on the man who'd shared my bed for 8 years. I held that shirt to my nose in our laundry room, breathing in proof that another woman had been close enough to leave her mark on my husband, and something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest, replacing the hurt with something far more dangerous: calculation. I knew then that confronting David directly would accomplish nothing. He'd already proven himself capable of elaborate lies delivered with conviction. Men like him didn't confess when cornered. They doubled down, denied, gaslit until their victims questioned their own sanity. And I refused to give him that power over me. Instead, I began planning something far more satisfying than a tearful confrontation. I would give him exactly what he thought he wanted and watch him destroy himself in the process. That's when I called Maya, my closest friend since college, a brilliant woman with model looks and a doctorate in psychology who'd recently moved back to town after her divorce. Maya had always possessed an effortless magnetism that drew men like moths to flame, and I'd watched her navigate her ex-husband's infidelity with surgical precision. "Maya," I said when she answered the phone, "I need your help with something, and I think you're going to enjoy it." We met for coffee the next afternoon at a small cafe across town, where I laid out my suspicions and my plan. Maya listened with growing interest, her dark eyes gleaming with the prospect of orchestrated justice. "Your husband always did seem too good to be true," she said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "Men who present themselves as perfect family men often have the most to hide. I've seen it before. The righteous ones who lecture others about morality while living double lives. They're the most satisfying to expose." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So, you want me to be the bait, essentially?" "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I want to give him exactly what he thinks he wants and watch him hang himself with it." Maya's smile was predatory, beautiful, and sharp. "Perfect," she said. "I've been looking for a new project." The setup took weeks of careful orchestration. Maya began appearing in David's orbit gradually, naturally, like a coincidence rather than a trap. I suggested she join our gym, knowing David worked out every Tuesday and Thursday morning. She started attending the same yoga classes I knew he'd begun taking, claiming he needed stress relief. I arranged a dinner party and invited Maya along with several other friends, ensuring she'd meet David in our home, surrounded by the life he was betraying. I watched him that night, cataloging every micro-expression as Maya laughed at his jokes, touched his arm during conversation, and complimented his intelligence with the skill of a woman who understood exactly what she was doing. David's reaction was everything I'd expected and more. His eyes followed Maya around the room with barely concealed hunger. He became more animated in her presence, funnier, more charming, as if her attention was oxygen to a dying flame. When she mentioned being new to the area and not knowing many people, David immediately offered to show her around the city, claimed he knew all the best restaurants and hidden gems. His eagerness was pathetic and precisely what I counted on. Maya played her role perfectly, expressing fascination with his knowledge, gratitude for his kindness, and subtle hints of availability that any married man with functioning brain cells would have recognized as dangerous territory. But David wasn't thinking with his brain anymore. He was thinking with his ego and his libido, a combination that made men remarkably stupid. I watched my husband of 8 years, the father of my children, transform into a walking cliché before my eyes, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction at how predictable he'd become. Maya texted me updates throughout the following weeks. David had started showing up at the gym during her workout times, suggesting they grab smoothies afterward. He'd offered to help her apartment hunt, claiming expertise in the local real estate market. He'd begun texting her regularly, under the guise of sharing restaurant recommendations and city insights. But Maya showed me the messages, and they revealed a man testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before she'd push back. She never pushed back. Instead, she encouraged him with the subtle skill of a master manipulator, telling him how helpful he was, how much she appreciated having such a good friend in a new city, how rare it was to meet a man who was both intelligent and kind. The compliments fed his ego, while her carefully deployed vulnerability made him feel needed, protective, essential. Maya understood that men like David didn't just want sex. They wanted to be heroes in their own narratives, rescuers of beautiful women who recognized their worth in ways their wives allegedly didn't. Within a month, David was spending more time texting Maya than talking to me. He'd smile at his phone during dinner, claiming his brother had sent a funny meme, when I knew it was her, making him feel clever and desired. His lies became more elaborate. And more frequently, meetings that didn't exist. Client dinners that were actually romantic restaurants. Weekend work sessions that involved zero work. Maya documented everything for me. Photographs of David entering her apartment building, receipts from their dates, screenshots of his increasingly inappropriate text messages, evidence of a man systematically destroying his marriage while believing himself the protagonist of a great romance. The beautiful thing about cheaters is they always think they're smarter than everyone else. David began treating me with the patronizing kindness men show women they're preparing to discard. Gentle condescension mixed with manufactured guilt. He'd bring me flowers randomly, claiming he just wanted to show appreciation for all I did for the family, but his eyes never met mine when he presented them. He'd suggest I spend more time with friends, claiming I deserved more fun in my life, while secretly hoping I'd be distracted enough not to notice his absences. He'd compliment my parenting with the tone of someone acknowledging a business partner's competence rather than expressing love for his wife. Every gesture felt like preparation for an eventual abandonment, like he was building a case for why I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he deigned to give me. But I wasn't the naive wife he thought I was. I was the architect of his downfall, and I was just getting started. Maya's reports became increasingly detailed. David had begun talking about feeling trapped in his marriage, claiming I didn't understand him anymore, that we'd grown apart, that he felt like a stranger in his own home. The irony was exquisite. David complaining about feeling disconnected from the woman he was systematically betraying while pouring his emotional energy into another woman. But Maya fed his delusions with perfect precision, telling him how terrible it must be to feel unappreciated at home, how a man like him deserved someone who truly saw his worth, how some people were just incompatible no matter how hard they tried. She was giving him permission to betray me while making him feel noble about it, and he swallowed every word like a man dying of thirst. Maya's reports that David had begun talking about divorce, not immediately, but eventually, when the time was right, when he could figure out how to minimize damage to the children, when he could ensure I'd be financially secure because he was such a good man who wanted to do right by everyone. The selfless hero of his own story, sacrificing his happiness for others until he simply couldn't anymore. The narrative was so perfectly crafted, so beautifully self-serving, that I almost admired its construction. By winter, David and Maya were having a full affair, meeting at her apartment twice a week in addition to their public outings, disguised as friendship. Maya's acting was flawless. She played the role of conflicted other woman perfectly, expressing guilt about getting involved with a married man while simultaneously encouraging David to follow his heart. She told him she'd never felt a connection like this before, that she tried to stay away but couldn't, that sometimes the universe brought people together for a reason, even if the timing was complicated. She made him feel like their affair was destiny rather than betrayal, fate rather than choice. David ate it up because men like him needed to believe their infidelity was somehow noble, that they were star-crossed lovers rather than lying cheaters. He began staying out later, coming home with elaborate stories about work emergencies and client crises, while his phone buzzed constantly with messages he'd read with barely concealed excitement before quickly deleting. He started showering immediately upon arrival home, claiming stress made him feel dirty, but I knew he was washing off her scent, her touch, the evidence of his double life. He thought he was being clever, but he was actually providing me with more evidence of his systematic deception. The breaking point came on our anniversary. David had forgotten completely, despite my subtle reminders throughout the week. When I mentioned dinner reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, he looked confused, then guilty, then angry at himself for forgetting. He recovered quickly, suggesting we celebrate the following weekend, claiming work had him swamped with a major deadline. But Maya had already told me he'd asked her to spend that evening with him, planning to take her to the same hotel where we'd spent our wedding night. The symmetry was breathtaking in its cruelty. My husband replacing me with another woman on the anniversary of our marriage at the location where we'd promised to love each other forever. That night, as David worked late again, I sat in our bedroom surrounded by 8 years of shared memories. Photos from our honeymoon, the girls' baby pictures, love letters he'd written during a business trip early in our marriage when he'd claimed he missed me so much he could barely function. I touched each memento, feeling the weight of what I was about to destroy. Because once I executed my plan, there would be no going back. We would be over. Not just the marriage, but the family, the shared history, the man I'd loved would become a stranger. and our daughters would grow up in a broken home. But David had made that choice, not me. He decided our marriage was disposable, that his vows were suggestions rather than promises, that 8 years of love and trust could be discarded for the thrill of deceiving me with a beautiful woman who made him feel young and exciting again. He'd chosen to become a cliché rather than fight for what we'd built together. And now he would face the consequences of that choice, with the same cold calculation he'd used to betray me. I spent the following week gathering final pieces of evidence. Maya provided hotel receipts, restaurant bills, photographs of them together looking every inch the happy couple. She'd been thorough in her documentation, creating an irrefutable timeline of David's infidelity that no lawyer could dispute or minimize. I opened new bank accounts in my name only and began quietly transferring funds from our joint accounts, not enough to constitute theft, but enough to secure my financial independence. I consulted with the best divorce attorney in the city, a woman with a reputation for ruthless competence in protecting betrayed spouses' interests. I documented every lie David had told, every evening he'd claimed to be working while actually with Maya, every manipulation he'd used to cover his tracks. Maya's final report came on a Thursday morning. David had told her he was going to ask me for a divorce soon, that he couldn't continue living a lie anymore, that he owed it to both of us to be honest about his feelings. He'd apparently worked himself into believing he was doing the noble thing, ending an unfulfilling marriage to pursue true love. Maya had encouraged him with perfect manipulation, telling him how brave he was being, how much courage it took to follow his heart, how she admired his honesty and integrity. The irony was staggering. David praising himself for honesty while living an elaborate lie, claiming integrity while systematically deceiving his wife, talking about courage while sneaking around like a coward. But Maya wasn't finished with her performance. She told David she was scared about what would happen when he left me, worried that I might try to turn the children against him, concerned about how the divorce might affect his relationship with his daughters. She planted seeds of paranoia, making him believe I might become vindictive in ways that would justify his preemptive strikes against me. She was preparing him to view me as the enemy rather than the victim, setting up his defensive narrative before I'd even fired the first shot. Her psychological manipulation was masterful, and I felt genuine admiration for her skill in playing him like an instrument. That Friday evening, David came home with flowers and a guilty expression, the same combination that had become his signature move over recent months. But this time felt different, more final, like a farewell rather than a distraction. He suggested we talk after the girls went to bed, claimed he had important things to discuss about our future. His tone was gentle but rehearsed, like he'd practiced the conversation in his car on the drive home. I accepted the flowers with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and agreed we should definitely talk later. After all, I had quite a few things to discuss with him as well. After putting Emma and Sophia in bed, I found David pacing in our living room, running his hands through his hair the way he did when nervous. He'd positioned himself near the window overlooking our backyard, where we'd played with the girls countless evenings, where we'd dreamed about their futures, planned family vacations, discussed the addition we'd never build. Now, the irony of the location wasn't lost on me. David choosing to destroy our marriage in the same room where we'd built so many happy memories. "Sarah," he began, his voice carefully modulated, "we need to talk about us, about our marriage. I think we both know things haven't been the same lately." I settled in my chair, folding my hands in my lap with perfect composure. "What exactly are you trying to say, David?" He looked surprised by my calm tone, as if he'd expected tears or pleading. Instead, I sat like a queen on her throne, waiting to hear how a peasant planned to betray her. "I think we've grown apart," he continued, gaining confidence from my apparent acceptance. "I feel like we're more like roommates than husband and wife. We go through the motions, but the connection isn't there anymore. I don't think either of us is truly happy, and I believe we owe it to ourselves and to the girls to be honest about that." I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words for the first time, rather than anticipating them for weeks. "And what do you think we should do about this problem, David?" His relief was palpable. He'd expected a fight, accusations, tears. Instead, I was giving him permission to continue his rehearsed speech. "I think," he said, choosing his words carefully, "we should consider separation. Maybe some time apart will help us figure out what we really want. I can move into an apartment temporarily, give you space to think about whether this marriage is really what you want. I'll still see the girls regularly, still provide for everyone, but maybe we both need to explore what makes us happy." He delivered this monologue with the solemnity of a man making a great sacrifice, rather than abandoning his family for his mistress. I sat in silence for a long moment, letting him squirm under my steady gaze. Then I smiled, a smile that made him shift uncomfortably in his chair. "That's interesting, David, because I've been doing some thinking too, some exploring of my own, and I've discovered some fascinating things about what makes people happy." His face went pale as the implications of my tone registered, but I wasn't finished yet. I stood, walked to the bookshelf where I'd hidden a manila folder thick with documentation, and returned to my chair. David watched every movement like prey tracking a predator, sensing danger but unable to flee. I opened the folder, deliberately, slowly, and placed the first photograph on the coffee table between us. It showed David and Maya entering her apartment building, his hand on the small of her back, their body language intimate and unmistakable. David's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, recognition, panic, then a desperate attempt at righteous indignation. "Sarah, what is this?" he demanded, but his voice cracked on the words. "This is you," I said, calmly, exploring what makes people you happy. Apparently, Maya Chen makes you happy. Expensive restaurants make you happy. Lying to your wife makes you happy. Betraying your family makes you very, very happy. I placed another photograph on the table, this one showing them kissing in the hotel parking lot. "Where did you get these?" he whispered, his earlier confidence evaporating completely. "I have a very good friend," I replied, placing more evidence on the table. Receipts, text messages, a detailed timeline of his affair, all documented with precision that would make any divorce attorney weep with joy. Someone who helped me explore the fascinating world of my husband's secret life. And David, you've been so busy exploring that you've built quite an impressive collection of experiences. I watched him realize the scope of his exposure, the careful documentation, the systematic evidence gathering, the fact that I'd known about his affair longer than he'd probably been having it. His face went gray as he calculated the implications for divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, his reputation. But I still wasn't finished. "The beautiful thing about having a psychologist as an accomplice," I continued conversationally, "is that she understands how to make men feel comfortable enough to reveal their true selves. Maya told me such interesting things about your conversations, David, about how trapped you feel in this marriage, how I don't understand you, how you deserve someone who appreciates your worth, how you're planning to divorce me anyway, so really you're just following your heart." His mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. "She also told me about your concerns that I might turn the children against you, how you're worried I'll be vindictive in the divorce, how you think I might try to destroy your relationship with the girls." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "And David, those are very prescient concerns, because that's exactly what I'm going to do." He tried to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him like the child he'd revealed himself to be. "See, the thing is, Maya's not actually interested in you. She's my friend, my very close friend, who agreed to help me document your infidelity because I suspected you were cheating and wanted proof before I destroyed you. She never wanted you, David. She was bait in a trap, and you walked into it so eagerly, so predictably, that it was almost boring to watch you. You're not having a passionate love affair. You're the victim of an elaborate setup designed to expose you as the lying, cheating fraud you've become." David's face went through shock, denial, rage, then something that looked like genuine fear, as the full scope of my orchestration became clear. He tried to speak several times, but seemed incapable of forming words. Finally, he managed this. "This isn't real, Sarah. This is some kind of elaborate joke or psychological experiment. You can't be serious about this." I smiled again, that same cold expression that had unsettled him earlier. "Oh, David, I'm completely serious. I have documented evidence of your adultery, your lies, your theft of marital funds for your affair, your plans to abandon your family. Evidence that will ensure I receive primary custody of our daughters, favorable financial arrangements, and social vindication, while you're revealed as exactly what you are, a middle-aged cliché who threw away his family for a fantasy." But here's the truly beautiful part, I continued, standing and gathering my evidence. I don't have to turn the children against you, David. You're going to do that yourself. Because Emma and Sophia are going to learn that Daddy lied to Mommy, that he broke his promises, that he chose another woman over his family and children. Children have very clear ideas about fairness and betrayal. They're going to make their own decisions about what kind of man their father is. I walked toward the door, then turned back for my final words. David, you wanted to explore what makes you happy. Well, now you get to explore what it feels like to lose everything that actually mattered while chasing something that was never real. Maya will disappear from your life because her job is finished. I'll take the house, the children, and most of our assets, while you get to start over as a divorced man with a reputation for betrayal, limited custody rights, and the knowledge that your children now view you as the man who made Mommy cry. He sat there, broken and speechless, as I left him alone with the wreckage of his choices. The divorce proceeded exactly as I'd planned. Maya vanished from David's life immediately, blocking his number, changing her routine, disappearing like the mirage she'd always been. David tried desperately to contact her, showing up at her apartment, the gym, anywhere he'd ever seen her, but she was gone, leaving him to face the consequences of his betrayal alone. The evidence I'd gathered made the legal proceedings a formality. David's lawyer advised him to accept my terms rather than face a trial that would publicly expose his infidelity in humiliating detail. I received primary custody of our daughters, the house, and a financial settlement that ensured my independence. David got supervised visitation rights, an apartment across town, and the knowledge that his children now view you as the man who made Mommy cry. Months later, when people asked how I discovered his affair, I'd tell them the truth. Sometimes the universe provides exactly the right friend at exactly the right time to help you see clearly. Maya had given me the gift of certainty, the proof I needed to act decisively, rather than living in doubt or denial. She'd helped me turn David's weakness against him, using his own desires to build the trap that caught him. I felt no guilt about the deception because David had deceived me first, had planned to abandon me, had stolen from our marriage to fund his fantasy. I simply gave him what he thought he wanted and let him destroy himself in the pursuit of it. That's not cruelty, it's justice. And sometimes justice requires elaborate orchestration to be truly satisfying. Now I live peacefully in our house with my daughters, who've learned that their mother is not someone to be underestimated or betrayed. David lives alone in his apartment, visiting his children on weekends when they're willing to see him, struggling to rebuild relationships he damaged through his own choices. He lost everything real for something that was never there at all, and I've never felt a moment's regret about showing him exactly what his choices cost. That's the story of how my husband's weakness became his downfall, and how I found satisfaction in giving him precisely what he asked for: autonomy from our marriage and the consequences that came with it. If that makes me calculating, then calculation was the price of my dignity, and it was the price I was more than willing to pay.